How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we're going to have a quick discussion today. My guest today will be Joe Pomponio, and we're going to be talking about recent news. Prison staff warned Danilo Cavalcante's planned escape a month before he fled, and that's what emails show. So what I want to do today is discuss what steps should be taken both from frontline staff and up-level management, who's going to have to provide probably most of those approvals to deal with intel that could relate to planned escape. What are we doing to prevent it from happening? It's pretty recent topic. I want to make sure that we cover it, we get the right information out there, and there's always an effort to grow, but also give the public some knowledge that they may not be aware of, because most of the time the public thinks that we don't take efforts. I just want people to know that regardless of this situation here, if one facility fails to do something that they're supposed to do, and this is just in general, don't look at it as that's how all facilities operate. I want to remove that unfair generalization, because there are practices that are in play that showcase the highest levels of safety and security. These are practices that I'm aware of, practices that Joe's aware of, and we're going to discuss it real quick, just to bring to your attention of what should have happened when intel comes your way of a possible planned escape. But before we do that, let me go ahead and get my sponsors. Guys, don't forget, check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do here in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. So if you're looking to seek higher education, get that degree. Maybe you want to teach at school, or you just want to get a degree to move up at the job. American Military University is very supportive of us in corrections. So please, if you get a chance, check it out. They have programs geared for us in corrections. So please, if that's something you're interested in doing, please check out American Military University. Hey guys, we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. That book is on the market, doing very well. Maybe working with the ACA real soon on, maybe doing some more with education of staff and trying to kind of help with morale. But this book, again, does very well for me nationally. It sells very well. This book is available on Amazon. Link to that is in the description. And we also have my baby, How to Succeed in Corrections. This book's got tons of tips, tons of advice. It's just a great book if you're looking to make this a career and, get the most of it. And again, this book is available through Blue 360 Media. That's the publisher, and the link to that is in the description as well. And they're also publishing my next book, which will kind of continue off this one, but it's going to be more towards rookie staff, but it's going to need senior influence, because I know people have that saying like, oh, I wish I would have knew. What is it? What I know now, I wish I would have knew then. Yeah, that may be good, but the problem is, you may not have had the capability to understand that information back then. That's why the book I wrote is going to share some knowledge coming from this higher level, wishing I would have known that as a rookie, but it may need to be translated by senior staff who may speak the language. That's what my wife said anyway. So it makes sense to me, because people would say like, oh, hey, Gangi, that if you were to look at your career, when you were a rookie and you had the same knowledge you do right now, what would you tell yourself? I would tell myself a lot of things. I just don't know if I would be able to understand it as a rookie, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Hey, Joe, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Corrections of 30 years, and currently working in the jail division of our local sheriff's department here, and a panel member for Tier Talk.
And we love having you. Joe, this will be quick. Let me just read you this quick article. They basically, a couple of days ago, they found out that there may have been information that could have prevented the escape of Cavalcante. And I just want to go ahead and read what was sent my way through Corrections 1. Okay, so prison staff warned Danilo Cavalcante planned escape a month before he fled. That's what emails show. A corrections officer at Chester County Prison warned staff that Danilo Cavalcante was preparing to escape weeks before he broke out, according to county officials. Now, this is a quote coming from Sergeant Jerry Beavers. I am just sending this because I don't want this to come back on us or Officer Gerardo Hernandez in any way. He noted back in July that this inmate was planning an escape. And that's what Sergeant Jerry Beavers wrote in an email to Captain Harry Griswold hours after Cavalcante escaped on August 31st by crab walking up the prison wall onto its roof. The email was first reported by ABC News. Cavalcante, who had been sentenced to life in prison for stabbing his ex-girlfriend to death in front of her children, was moved to a maximum security unit at the state correctional facility at Phoenix after evading police for 2 weeks. During the manhunt across Chester County, authorities say he stole a van from a dairy, contacted former co-workers for help, broke into a house in West Chester, and took peaches, apples, and snap peas, and then stole a rifle from another home in South Coventry Township. He was captured behind a tractor dealership in Pottstown on September 13th. The officer on watch when Cavalcante escaped was fired. I believe that's the tower officer. That July warning from corrections officers was not the first time Cavalcante was considered a flight risk. A source at the Chester County Prison who spoke on the condition of being anonymous because he was not authorized to discuss the investigation said Tuesday that Cavalcante was considered a risk of escape the entire time he was incarcerated at the facility. During Cavalcante's trial, he was transported to the county courthouse in West Chester in a chase car, a vehicle that sheriff deputies use in pursuits rather than the standard vehicle used for transporting prisoners. It was done, the source said, as an extra layer of precaution because Cavalcante had tried to flee to Mexico after killing his ex. Chester County spokesperson Rebecca Brain said Tuesday that Cavalcante was initially identified as an escape risk when he was admitted to the prison in 2021. Additionally, county officials have received unsubstantiated information from an unknown source that Cavalcante planned to escape around the time of his trial. And that's according to Rebecca Brain. Before Cavalcante escaped, Chester County Prison took security measures for inmates identified as an escape risk only when they were being transported off prison property, Brain said in a statement to the Inquirer. That policy, she said, was one reason the prison board put new leadership in place. The prison has since made changes to the way it handles inmates at risk of escape under acting warden Howard Holland, whose first day on the job was the day Cavalcante ran away. The changes include assigning 1 or 2 correctional officers to monitor high-risk inmates when they're outside of their cell. That's what Brain says. The email from Beavers was forwarded to Holland after the escape so that the then new warden knew the information about an escape was previously noted. Cavalcante was not the first inmate to escape from Chester County Prison in 2023. Igor Bolte broke out of the facility in May by scaling the walls of the prison yard in the same manner. After that incident, the prison began adding razor wire to gaps on the roof, but hadn't yet completed the job when Cavalcante escaped. Holland told residents at the town hall in September. Holland promised additional security measures at the facility, including more razor wire, 50 to 75 new security cameras, and a dedicated officer to monitor those cameras around the clock, as well as potential GPS monitoring for high-risk inmates. And then this is what he tells the public or the town hall. I want you to honestly know from the bottom of my heart that I'm embarrassed and angry for what happened. That's what he told the town hall. But I'm here to tell you that I believe I can make things better. So basically, we already know that this inmate was an escape risk. Obviously, he didn't want to get caught. He was fleeing. He would have probably fled to Mexico if having the chance. So obviously, there's measures in place when dealing with we would call him a high-risk inmate. And sometimes it's very unique that they mention this in the article. Sometimes those measures that are put in place may only be utilized or seen when the inmate is traveling outside of the prison, or the jail, whether it's to court, medical, whatever it is, because then you have to put all those measures in place to make sure you do what the high-risk transport requires, which could include a chase vehicle, like they mentioned, proper shackling, black box, extra staffing, a supervisor, whatever those measures would be for that agency. But again, Joe, would you agree that sometimes when you have a high-risk inmate, high risk in relation to escape, most of the measures that you're going to see that are needed are probably only implemented when the person is traveling outside of the facility, as if that's the only time that they can escape?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to transfer them outside the facility, yeah, I mean, full restraints, is a must. Chase vehicle is a good idea. Another thought process too would be maybe a stun cuff or a stun ankle bracelet. With him being, with him having a life sentence, they're pretty much all the same. They got everything to gain and nothing to lose by trying. So, you got to keep that in the back of your mind while you're transporting these guys. And, because it doesn't take but a fraction of a second for them to slip out and disappear.
Yeah, I mean, the reward is freedom. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
who's not going to go for that? So, we're not going to really talk too much about this specific case, but we're going to kind of talk about just what happens if there's a chance that you discover a note or something that can make you believe that someone's planning an escape. So in this case here, the officer that discovered or got the information, it looked like he got the information through possibly an inmate, an informant. And then basically what he did was he took the information, brought it to the higher ups. And then, of course, the higher ups, they move it up the chain until it finally gets to administration, in which administration will have final oversight as to what we're going to do with that individual. And this should include everything from possible investigations to moving the inmate, whatever it is. And we'll get to that. But basically, Joe, when you get some intelligence that as a frontline officer, that there's a chance that an inmate is going to escape, let's say an inmate tells you that, an informant, whether you buy into it at that moment or not, because they could be playing a game, you never know. But again, it's because you never know. We always have to act on universal precaution. And even someone had mentioned, well, why would an inmate want to tell custody about a possible escape of another inmate? Wouldn't that inmate want to see someone defeat the system? No, because the facility will go into lockdown.
Absolutely.
And all those visits, those time with their family, all that stuff, not happening. And that lockdown could be for quite some time. So a lot of inmates are not in for that bullshit. And what they'll do is they actually could believe that, that inmate that's trying to escape is kind of being selfish. Because at the end of the day, you're going to take off. We're all going to be locked in. Now, granted, there could be some that love when the system gets screwed over, and they'll clap it and they'll cheer it and they'll feel, oh, this was great. The criminal justice system, just got, shamed right in the face. But in most cases, the inmates that are left behind that have to deal with the lockdown, that they usually get a little pissed. So if they feel that there could be a chance that there could be a potential escape and they got visits coming up and they're going to see their family, whatever it is, that could be enough motivation to go to staff and say, hey, listen, I want you to know something. Such and such in the cell, he's getting ready to jump ship. So I just want to put it out there. And now, granted, when they say that, they do expect some level of action. So again, you always got to be careful because it could be false intelligence to get you to do something, but you still have to act on it. So, Joe, an information comes your way, possible escape from, let's say, an informant. What do you do as an officer with that information?
The first thing the officer should do is notify their direct supervisor. Go to that supervisor, let them know what intelligence you got, how you got it. There's a couple of different scenarios that play into this. It could be, an actual escape attempt, or it could be them trying to get you to focus your energy on them while something else is going to be taking place in another part of the facility. So, there's scenarios you got to keep in mind while you're dealing with this, and as a supervisor, my first step, regardless of whether the information is credible or not, I'm going to grab that offender and we're going straight to a secure housing unit. I'm going to have, a lot of the times we'll put an officer at the cell that the inmate came from to secure his property. Because once we secure that, we're going to have our internal affairs department go through his phone records and phone calls and stuff like that, look through his mail, while the officers actually search the property to see if there's anything relevant in the property to, that he might be using to facilitate escape, a hand-drawn map, letters coming in, maybe a rendezvous at some point, something of that nature. While that's going on, it tends to get bigger and bigger as you go. You're going to notify your duty warden and let them know what you got. Say, hey, I've already locked this offender up. I got information that he might be planning to escape. A lot of the times I'll lock that entire wing down, because you don't know, is he going by himself? Is he going to have help? Is he going to have an accomplice? Is it going to be more than just him? Because at that point, you're going to start conducting interviews and, through the offender population with the other staff to find out, what they know, what they've heard, anything that may be out of place, out of normal. Again, when you're dealing with an inmate with a life sentence, at that point, they got everything to gain and nothing to lose. So
I like what you're saying. I want to go back on something. So
sure.
when something like this happens, it's very good to have a good trust between management and frontline, and where frontline's empowered. Because I love the fact that you're going to pass the information up, but you're still going to commit to actions on the floor because you're not waiting for the final approval. I mean, if the administration said no, we can't do these. Okay, then all right, I'll beg for the forgiveness. But having said that, I'd rather keep things fluid because you want to have your eyes on that individual immediately. The moment that it's said, you report to your supervisor and we're going to get our hands on that inmate. You're not going to sit there and delay that response. So it's great for when the administrator gets the phone call of, hey, by the way, we got information of a possible escape, and the shift commander says these are the steps that we took. Basically, the administrator just kind of co-signs it. So, okay, gotcha. So you secured them. You got them in some level of investigative housing. Did you call the internal affairs unit to see if they're interested in interviewing them? And obviously, like you said, the investigative division will look at the phones. And this is where it's all a partnership effort, by the way, because we want to get the visitor list. We want to basically make sure that we get any possible information that could aid. And again, I love the fact that when the shift commander is calling the warden, we've already checked the cell. We're looking, maybe listening to some phone, depending on who does that, you or the investigative agency. So the basic thing is you're already en route, because then now, as the administrator, when I got to call this in, I got a lot of information. So when I got to call it into my bosses, I could say, hey, we discovered this, but real quick, let me tell you the steps that we have done already. And the reason why that's good is because you don't want to be micromanaged by that highest level. They trust you to know at this point, what you're doing. And good administration knows, let's lean on our front line for some of that information. But again, if they're empowered, they know what to do. And then basically, you just kind of say, okay, you got that done. That's great. Are we able to do this? Oh, that's great. Awesome. Okay, let me go call this in and I can be specific. So then what happens is you tell the specifics of, hey, such and such officer was approached by an anonymous informant. The informant mentioned a potential escape. The officer immediately reported to the sergeant, who reported to the lieutenant, who reported to the however it works, and it got to my hands. So this is what we have done so far. So far, we have secured the inmate in investigative housing. We have notified the Internal Affairs Division to see if there's any interest. They've already told us that they're going to check on their phones, their mail. We pulled his visit card. We looked at his last visit. We're running some footage now of the unit, to see what his activity's been the last couple of days. It's just a whole gamut. But here's the cool part of it all. Why we're running all this time is kind of on our side a little bit, because the inmate is going to be secured in investigative housing. That's why we're moving him. We're moving him out of the unit and securing him in an area where he can't talk to anyone, can't make phone calls, can't do nothing. And this gives us a chance to really see what's going on, as opposed to some places that, may leave the inmate on the unit, which is foolish, and try to work around that. No, put the inmate in a secured area. They're not allowed to get phone calls. They're not allowed to talk to anyone. And it gives you a couple of days to kind of figure out what you have going on. And be mindful, one last thing, when you have that inmate in that highest level of restriction, you can't keep them there forever. Most places may say, hey, you better get moving on this. You got about 3 days. Because, after that, you may be able to extend it, but you can't keep that inmate in that level of restriction for forever, because then obviously they could be considering some level of violating their rights. So you have to make sure that if you're going to be extending something, that there's some good evidence to do so. But again, Joe, you were spot on. I love that chain of command. I love the empowerment. And I think that for me, as an administrator, I love when the actions were taken by the front line. And basically when I'm called, I can show support. Okay, guys, that was great. Thank you very much. Let me make my phone calls. And, see if there's anything else we have to do at this point. Now, Joe, I want to mention something too, just as a side note, so I don't forget it. If by chance, nothing comes up during this investigation, whatever it is, don't put the inmate in the same cell. I mean, I would say don't put him in the same unit, but sometimes that's not always an option. But don't put him in the same cell, because if it is happening, that means there's a level of comfortability that the inmate has in that cell or in that housing unit. So sometimes by just shaking it up a little bit, either if you can switch their housing unit or a minimal switch their cell, it breaks away from that level of comfortability or that routine that allowed them to plan for whatever this potential escape could be. And by the way, in this case here, there was some reason to believe it could be true because he was going on trial, looking at probably a life sentence. So, Joe, what's your thoughts also about shaking up the location if you have to return him back because, let's say, nothing's coming up out of the investigation?
Well, yeah, I mean, and like I said, the other scenario too is maybe somebody's hating on him and doesn't like him where he's at, and if you put him back, he might conduct his own investigation, find out who gave up the information. Then you got a retaliation issue and possible assault issue that may be taking place afterwards. So, it's always good to take them out of their comfort zone and place them where, in a new scenery. And, like I said, by placing them back in the same cell where you took them from, you're not only putting him at risk, but you're possibly putting somebody else at risk because, the old convict code, they're going to get to the bottom of who snitched. So,
And Joe, you're spot on. You always have to kind of know the motives, and I love that. But whether you believe the motive is legit or not, you still have to act. It's one of those things where you have no choice but to respond effectively, because if you don't respond, that's a problem. Now, here's the thing here too. Once you get a note like this, as you could see, you got to act immediately. Here, the failure to act to me is unacceptable. If I found out about this at 2 a.m, I'm handling it at 2:01. I mean, you don't sit on this and say, "Well, I'm not going to bother with this. I'll think about it." Well, no, you do it now. You check now. I mean, you could have. I mean, an officer could be doing a tour, and an inmate could be up and say, "Hey, Joe," it could be like 3 a.m. "Hey, Joe, I think such and such is going to escape." Call the supervisor. Blah blah blah. Guess what? We're doing something at that moment. It's not something that you delay because, again, something like this happens where public finds out that there's a good chance that someone knew and they didn't act. Now, that person who didn't act not only put everybody at risk, but also cost the state a lot of money in that manhunt, whatever, in their efforts to find them. So, again, you're getting intel, and that's what the officers are there for. They're giving you intel, and you don't act on that intel. I got to say, I'm not saying this is the case here. It's still written, I can't verify that. But I will say, if you don't act on the intel, shame on you. I mean, that is really, in my experience, Joe, and I'm assuming in yours, if there's any intel that comes your way that has an inch, the smallest thing that could lead to a possible escape, you meet that inch with the full force of whatever has to be done to prevent it, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's not regardless whether you think it's bullshit or not. That's something that you don't laugh off or say, he's full of crap. It's somebody either owes him from a football game bet and just wants him off the pot so they don't have to pay him, or it doesn't matter. When it comes to an escape, it's all hands on deck. It's better to meet it with total force and let it turn out to be nothing than do nothing and it turned out to be a brutal escape. God forbid if this guy had to hurt somebody and they knew about it but failed to act. I mean, it's a classic case of deliberate indifference.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the good summary of our show. The point is, we have to act on that information, figure out everything later on, but intel like that puts us automatic in reaction mode. We could be a little strategic in our response, but you have to act. There's no holding on to that letter and saying, "Yeah, let me think this through and I'll come back at it tomorrow." No,
but
you're going to go at it.
So as a supervisor, you need to make sure you do a good, thorough investigation into this too. I mean, don't just BS your way through it and send it up the pike as nothing's wrong. Be thorough about your your investigation. Make sure you're interviewing some of the other offenders on the wing. Make sure you're looking through the visitation list. How many visits did he get? Is there a spike in his phone calls? You got to make sure you're doing a good, solid investigation. As long as you're doing it right the first time, you never have to look over your back and make sure it's done a second time.
Yeah, and guys, as an officer, if you want to protect your source, I believe you don't have to give up your source unless the AG tells you to. I don't know how that works in every state. But again, if it's a legitimate source, I would trust it to some level of confidentiality with the investigative division, because this is something that you're going to want them to know, because they may have to kind of ask that inmate to validate, hey, how'd you find out about this? That's the key. So you're going to want to share that information. Now, I know some cases that could be hard because the officer may not be compelled to have to say to give up that witness, but I would really like to hope that you work with the investigative division to go ahead and give them the information that they need, because they're really going to have to go ahead and safely, and hopefully, again, for the investigative division, you're doing this safely with the safety of that informant in mind, because again, okay, they give you the information, but don't forget the officer still got to manage their safety. So don't just think you're going to take the information, put the guy on blast, and then have the officer deal with the repercussion. No, the officer's trusting you with the information. You should hold it as delicate as possible. Find some ways to, discreetly speak to that inmate and basically find out, hey, how did you get this information? What makes you think it's credible? Blah, 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 blah. But again, that's definitely a working partnership between the agents, between the investigative agency and the officer who gets the information. But I know some officers may want to protect the intel or the person who given the intel, but sometimes that may not help validate, because I would be very interested as the investigators to find out how your informant knew, or first start off by saying, how did you find out? Well, my informant, I need to know who that informant is, because I need to know how they found out, because that could be the source of the escape. So you're going to want to share that information, however discreetly, but again, as the investigative division, have some respect in the integrity of that information, because again, ultimately, the safety of that inmate is going to fall back into those officers' hands. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, other than, when it comes to dealing with offenders that are either dealing with a life sentence or has the possibility of dealing with a life sentence, treat them like they're all escape risks. Don't take any shortcuts. And, as a supervisor, if you get intel from your officers that somebody may be escaping, take it seriously. Make sure you're doing your due diligence in your investigations. Because nobody wants an escape on their hands. And after hearing about that article, I can only feel my heart goes out to that warden that stepped on there the same day that this guy burns off. What kind of shit luck is that? Do your due diligence in investigating. Like I said, I would rather meet an allegation with brutal force than, having it turn out to be real. Having an escape on a facility is not just, an escape. It's a black eye for the facility. It's a black eye for the agency. And it's like I mentioned earlier, it's a case of one of those, you knew and failed to act. It's not a good thing to have to try to justify yourself to folks over that. So do a good, solid investigation. If you get the intel, take it seriously. Even if it turns out to be BS, take it seriously, because of the fact that, escapes have become so rampant here lately. And I'll go back to the Lopez escape, from Texas Department of Corrections. This guy escapes off a chain bus and winds up killing 5 people. That's something that, the chain bus officers have to live with. That's something that the agency has to live with. And it's something that, the victims' families have to live with. So, do everything that you can to prevent the escape. Sound the alarm.
Yeah, guys, this is something you don't want to drop the ball on, because if it gets discovered that you were inactive on what should have been an immediate response, you got a lot of answering to do. And in some cases, you'll be lucky if you just lose your job. I mean, I'm just going to tell you that. You'll be lucky if you just lose your job. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe. All right, Joe. Thank you very much, brother.
All right, brother.
All right, I'll post it up shortly, brother.
Okay.
All right, later, bro. Thanks, man.
Later.